There's a lot to the web now. There's tons of different elements, there's tons of different tags, and it can be very overbearing. When the web started, it wasn't like that. It was pretty simple. There wasn't much you can do. And we're going to actually start like that. Now, some of these don't work anymore. Some of them have been discontinued. Some of them work, but they've been recommended to no longer be used. That's okay. The web is a dynamic thing. It changes every few years. And even when the languages and stuff don't change, the way that we do stuff with it can change as well. Even though we're going to go through and we're going to talk about things that maybe don't work anymore or play with practices that maybe aren't current, going through and being used to dealing with change better helps prepare you for what the web is really like anyway. So we're going to start with the oldest known prototype of HTML that I could find. So 0.A. So this was like super early. This wasn't designed to be a complete language yet. This was just designed to see if Sir Tim Berners-Lee's ideas worked. So he was just trying this out to prove that what he thought he could do actually worked. And if you're interested in seeing some more information about this and reading some more of the history of it, you can find more on some of this information from this website here, the Lost Tags of HTML. There's the URL. You can just Google it as well. So HTML is based on SGML. That's Standard Generalized Markup Language. And SGML is based on GML, Generalized Markup Language. And this goes back quite a ways. Like IBM was involved in this. It was like around the 60s that this sort of thing started. So if you go back and look at SGML or GML, you're going to see some similarities. HTML was considered an example of it until fairly recently, but we're not going to worry about that too much right now. So let's talk about the actual tags that were included in this original prototype. So the first one is the title tag. The title tag sets the title of your web page. So I have an example down here of what the tags look like for it. So it has an opening tag and a closing tag, and you can see where it puts that information. It puts it in the name that's displayed on the tab. When the web first started, we didn't have tabs yet. Each thing had to be in its own separate window, and that same information would be at the top of the window. Next, we have the paragraph tag. So it essentially defines paragraphs. So I've used several here to separate out these different chunks of text, and you can see what that actually looks like in the code below. You can use opening and closing tags for paragraph tags, or you can just use them to separate chunks of text. It'll work either way. And at the time, it was being used both ways, although you would normally be consistent at least within the same document. Next, we have heading tags. So at this point in time, there were 3 different heading tags: H1, H2, and H3. Part of it creates a hierarchy within the web page itself. So, important things are written in the larger tags. The H1 tag is considered to be something that has the highest importance. H2 creates a little bit smaller text, and it's considered of lower importance. Then H3 is the lowest importance of the heading tags that were available at this time. Of course, you still have paragraph tags below that, and those would be of even lesser importance. So these are sort of like, titles and subtitles, or headings and subheadings, that sort of idea. You've actually been seeing H3 tags across the 2 previous slides already. This here was an H3 tag. This here was an H3 tag here. I just didn't provide that sample of the code yet because that wasn't the point of those 2 slides. XMP allowed plain text. So the XMP is sort of serving as like a shortened form of the word example. If we take a paragraph tag and we put in some formatting in there, like using the tab to separate out that line, the no XMP tag here, and then the space here, this is a tab. That does not render in the regular paragraph text. However, if we use the XMP tag, that tab formatting does. We also have listing, and it works very similar now, although there used to be a difference. We have these tabs here, and it spaces them out identically. Now, this tab looks smaller than that tab. That's just sort of the way tabbing works. If you're familiar with how formatting with tabs work, it doesn't base it on the distance between these 2. It bases it on sort of measurements on the document itself. So here's a tab right here, and this jumped from here to there. The reason this jumped way over here was because this part of the text was already past that marking. So if I had put a tab here right after the is, it would have pushed this over to here. But because I didn't, and the text goes past that marking, the next tab is way over here. Now, what is the difference between listing and XMP? Now it's effectively nothing, but it used to be that XMP allowed you to include HTML tags on your page without them actually loading. So you could see them as like a way to write out like example code. Essentially what I'm doing here on the bottom, this is what you would have used the XMP tag for back when the web was first starting. Doesn't work anymore, but obviously there are other ways to do that since I'm still doing it. The next element to address are the anchor elements. And anchor elements are pretty important, but it might take you a little while to get your head around them. Basically, when you're linking from one website to another, you're using anchor elements. There are two main ones that were available at the time. You could use one to create a link like this, where we have this opening tag here. We have this href attribute, which defines where that link is going to go. And then we put in whatever text, like this here, that we're going to use to be the clickable link. And then we have a closing tag here for that element. This href basically stands for hyperlink reference. So the H for hyper and ref for reference. There's also a names. So an anchor name allows you to create a spot in the document that it will be linked to. So instead of linking to the very top of a page, you can actually use a names to link to like the middle of a document, either on the same page or on a different page. I'll show you how we can actually implement this in code in a future video. It's not as complex as it sounds. There were also unordered list elements from the very start. The unordered list element is a little bit more complex because it has multiple tags in it that create it. So this list here is created using 4 different tags. We have the UL tag to open it with, which stands for unordered list. Each item in the unordered list is defined with an LI tag, so that's list item. And then after all of the listed items, we have to close it with a closing tag, so /UL for unordered list. There were also ordered lists, so it's essentially the same thing, but instead of UL, we use OL. There were also dictionary lists, but this was a little different because we use a similar structure, but the tags look a little different. So we do use DL for dictionary list, just like unordered list or ordered list. But instead of having list items, we have 2 different things in there. We have a dictionary term, DT, which is like this top one here, and then we have DD, dictionary definition, which shows like this. So it formats it over a little bit already. So here's the tag for that dictionary term, and here's the tag for that dictionary definition. We also had a couple ways of formatting text. We had 4 different ways: HP0, HP1, 2, 3. They don't work anymore. A couple years ago, they still worked in some browsers, but I tried across Safari, Firefox, and Chrome, and they don't work on any of those anymore. If you're on a PC, I mean, you can try it in Internet Explorer. There are other browsers, of course, too, that you could try it in, but it didn't work in any of mine. I'm assuming it probably doesn't work in any of the other recently ones, too, unless maybe you have one that hasn't been updated in, like, a long time. And that's it. Those are all the tags that were available at the time. Of course, as time moved on, more and more tags were created, and there were quite a few interesting things that went on with that, and we'll talk about that later. But for right now, that's it. In the next video, we'll actually use some of those tags to modify our Hello World HTML file that we created previously.